Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man Podcast. Today's episode is an interview with Dr. Zac Seidler. He is the Global Director of Men's Health Research at Movember, a psychologist himself. And in this episode, we are going to be discussing the findings of Movember's upcoming October 2025 report entitled The Real Face of Men's Health. In this episode, we discuss what's getting in the way of men having more meaningful connections. More than being physically healthy, the one thing that you need to do if you want to live a longer, healthier life as a man, the issue of silence amongst men, and how men are so scared of rejection and vulnerability that they're choosing to suffer loneliness and all of the negative health benefits that this entails, i.e. living 20 to 30 years shorter than you should, and how men and how you can start to change the way that you think about yourself to be a happier, stronger, more vulnerable, and in my opinion, a better man, a better version of yourself. This episode is exciting because we get to actually talk with an expert on men's health, specifically on men's emotional health, on mental health, which is really the big focus of this podcast, is to talk about men's health beyond the physical fitness. So we get into a lot of really compelling information, a lot of great actionable information and insights. And I know that if you're interested in your health, this is one episode that you won't want to miss. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let's get into it. All right, Zac. Well, thanks for joining us today. And I understand you have some data for us on the latest in men's health.
I do, Dean, and who doesn't love data, as you say in America? We call it data down here in Australia.
Let's mess that up.
Well, it's really interesting to consider, what we do at Movember in trying to shine a light on things that we thought were pretty obvious when it comes to men's health, but especially in the States, no one has actually compiled a breakdown of what this looks like for men across, race and ethnicity, across age demographics. And so what we're actually releasing, calling The Real Face of Men's Health, is the first ever comprehensive report looking at what's going on for men and boys in the States when it comes to their health and well-being. And, the data is pretty staggering. I don't think that you need to look at the numbers to know on the ground that men's health is in crisis. If you look at the dads in your life, if you look at the young teenage boys who are, we know, struggling in school, struggling, with mental health, social media stuff, pornography, the issues abound. And when it comes down to it, the life expectancy gap, which between men and women, which you would think, is actually getting smaller over time. You think that progress is being made consistently. We always believe that health is getting better. We're getting innovation. We're consistently talking about this stuff. We have more and more research. Surely we're moving forward. And what we're actually finding is that the state of American men is actually going backwards in some ways and in some places. And so we really need to shine a light on this stuff. And we're lucky to have, certain governors have come out and made really clear that this is just not okay. Gavin Newsom came out, and Wes Moore has come out, and Spencer in Utah. There's a number of people who are going, okay, this is actually probably an issue that we need to start to tackle here. I think one of the main reasons for that is the pure economics of this, which is that when men die early from preventative causes, it costs billions of dollars. And you lose a father, a brother, a son, a worker, a community member. And I think that we've taken that for granted for far too long. So our report is really comprehensively trying to break down, not only state by state, but by different ethnic groups, what is happening and how we're actually going to go about it.
So what are some of the big findings? What are some of the big numbers or the big summaries that you've found? So when it comes to life expectancy, we've got a really big gap of, 6.8 years in Hispanic men between men and women. Overall, it's 5.4 years
is the life expectancy gap in the States between men and women, which is, women are living past 80 on average, and men are not breaking 75. Now, in other parts of the world, 75 is considered like the beginning of where, early death kind of comes on. If you die before 75, it's considered we could have probably prevented it. When your average American is not making it to 75, we have an issue. And so we've got really big, gaps in the Black community, in the, even amongst white men, we've got a serious, gap as well. So we need to take this stuff, very seriously around life expectancy. And there's a lot of reasons why that's happening. But I think that, one of the main things that I continue to focus on as a psychologist is the suicide rate. And we're seeing things moving in the wrong direction there as well. We know that suicide death is largely a male phenomenon. Like 76% of all suicides in the States are amongst men. And something that's really interesting is that everyone's focusing on young men and how, these rates are actually increasing in young men in like the 15 to 25-year-old age demographic, which is horrible. Like losing a boy at that age is just, really, really tragic. But what we're not focusing on is the fact that the numbers are really increasing in middle-aged and older white men. This notion of like disconnection and loneliness, which, we keep talking about in vague terms, I think we're missing a trick here when it comes to understanding how we're going to address and respond to these men who do not feel like they have purpose and meaning, who do not feel like they are needed in society, who move through these transitions from, teenager into worker, into father, into retiree. And those transitions cause serious pain for them that they cannot seemingly regulate, that they can't talk about, that they don't have any friends to actually discuss it with, or there's not enough openness and vulnerability to do so. So there's a massive call out there around, like, what are we doing here if we can't safeguard these guys who actually don't typically have a really complex mental health history? How are they slipping through the cracks, And I think we need to take that really, really seriously. We've got numbers galore in this document, and I'm hoping we can obviously link for your audience here so that they can take a look through it. And I don't want to bore them with numbers, but I think it's really, really important to just consider why it's been so hard to gain traction when it comes to talking about men's health. I think, you found yourself, I'm sure, Dean, that like talking about like stress and talking about, physical movement and exercise and nutrition, those types of topics seem to have, been put in the okay bucket for lots of men and boys. But when it comes to, talking about going to the doctor, when it comes to really understanding the burden of our own health and well-being on our mums, on our wives, when it comes to discussing, heart health, when it comes to talking about diabetes, like this stuff is just not commonplace amongst men. And I think that that's the reason, compared to women who have these conversations regularly, who have a relationship with their family physician, it shit hits the fan for us pretty early and we don't know what to do.
So do you think that it sounds like having conversations about living a healthy lifestyle is those are things that men are willing to have conversations about. So talking about working out, talking about different nutrition, I don't know, talking about supplements, I guess. But is there, I guess the question that I go to, is there an assumption that, or is there just like this sense of, it's too hard, I'm going to give up, if they aren't able to do the things that they think that they need to do? Like if it's too hard to exercise, or if they can't, maybe they were used to working out, lifting weights when they were younger and being able to run when they were younger, and now they try it again when they're 40s and 50s and like, oh, it's too hard, I give up. Or like, what do you think is the I mean, I don't know if there's kind of I guess what I'm getting at is kind of this distinction between like, here's general health, what's general, fitness conversations, and then if it doesn't work, goes into these other conversations, and men they're just not willing to have that conversation about like, if there are other issues. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that there is, there's so much desire for like that pain and gain situation, this biohacking that's rife on social media. Like all of us are getting this content, whether it's creatine or it's supplements or it's, how we're going to go about, getting the most productivity out of our day. That type of stuff is really resonating with lots of guys. And so I think we have a lot to learn when it comes to that, because a language has been created, products have been created. There is safety in that discussion amongst men as well. It's not shame-inducing. It's not seemingly vulnerable. The other side of the coin is like your traditional understanding of health and well-being, and, the fact that guys going to see their doctor, like firstly, the time in which they go and see the doctor is often extremely delayed. Yeah. When symptoms have gotten worse, crisis has hit, and their limits of self-reliance have come into play. And so they go, I can deal with this. This is fine. This isn't an issue. I don't want to spend the money on myself. I don't want to, take time off work. Every excuse known to man comes up, and eventually they hit a wall, and some of them go into ER and some of them go, into the morgue, to be honest with you. Like this is a, it's really this idea of like, I think not worthy of the type of care that I hope that my child has, that I hope that my wife has, or I don't believe that it will help. Or the really scary one to me as a psychologist is like, I don't want to find out. The amount of men who go, I don't want to go for my physical because I don't want to know if something is happening. I don't want to know if I've got cancer. I don't want to know if I've got heart disease. And my response to that always is like, are we not on this earth, for knowledge, for growth, for development? Like that's what being a man means, in this modern day.
Yeah.
That's what manhood should be. And so I find it really interesting that guys would rather bury their head in the sand sometimes. And I think we're starting to see a shift there, because guys are realizing, if I want to be a good employee, if I want to be a good husband, if I want to be a good father, I'm going to probably have to deal with my own shit. Like that's just how this works, if I'm going to succeed.
Yeah. And it makes me think about how, just the growing use of smartphones and, the ability to basically numb yourself to your emotions. Very easy, right? You don't ever have to actually deal with any challenging emotions if you don't want to, because there are so many easy ways to distract yourself. So, instead of dealing with this real situation in front of you, which is your health, you can just turn on Netflix and you forget about it. And then you go to work. And when you're at work, all you're thinking about is work. And then you come home and you're rushing about taking care of the kids, or like taking care of yourself, or you're distracting yourself with TikTok. And so I don't think men ever actually have the, I think it's very easy for men and women as well, but it's very easy for men to just distract themselves from that reality and be able to avoid, finding out whether or not they have something that's wrong with them. That's really easy.
It is. And I think that we need to find a way to sell preventative healthcare as, something that is actually worthwhile and something that's useful, because I think that it's this idea of like, oh, I'm okay now and I'll deal with it when it becomes a real problem. The data is really clear on the fact that delay, that period where prevention may have been possible, like that's, if you jump on it, then I always say as a psychologist, it's like, I don't want to see you when you can't get out of bed and you're at your lowest. Like lots of people believe that that's when you go and see a therapist. I'm like, that is the hardest time to make any change. I want to see you when you're at your best and you can like come and pick up tools from me and you can utilize them in those moments. Because otherwise I have to sit here and like coach you in the most simple things of like brushing your teeth and having a shower. That's not a good use of my time or yours either,
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that you said that made me think is this idea that men don't think they're worthy of treatment. So talk to me a little bit more about that. What is the where is this belief, is this a new belief, or is this just like, this sounds different from, the John Wayne era of, oh, I'm just going to tough it out and I'll be okay.
Yeah. Dean, I think that something that's really important here is that I'm trying, and our organization is trying to move away from, the Superman era, I think, in some ways,
Yeah.
and trying to clarify that being a man is a much more complex, nuanced, diverse experience than what is being sold. And if you speak with enough men like we do, millions of guys across the world, we start to realize that if you box them in, they will just give you the same answers over and over again. And so that tough, stoic mentality is still going strong. There's no doubt about that. Toughing it out is still a sentiment that many of us feel. It is something that prevents help seeking fundamentally. But there is also this idea of being the protector and provider means that I am here for the service of others. I am here to look after others. And therefore, I am undeserving of care myself. And, I'm sure, Dean, you can reflect on like the beauty of like having friends who you've shared with and they've shared with you, and there's this reciprocity, and it makes you feel seen and loved and cared for. And therefore you get to this point where you go, oh, maybe I deserve that warmth. I deserve that, that someone leaning in and actually asking what's going on. Lots of guys who are extremely disconnected and who are just going through that day-to-day grind are at odds with that feeling within themselves that maybe going and getting help is something, that is in line with their idea of manhood, is in line with their idea of what type of dad they want to be, what they want to model. And I think that the issue comes from silence, to be honest, Dean. Like that's where we're at right now, where if you do not have these conversations with others, if you're just going through this internal narrative, you're kind of going to trip yourself up. You're going to continuously like delay. It takes others often, and we know this in the data as well. I find it all the time, especially with men who are in like suicidal crisis. They say that the role of the other, whether it's a neighbor who comes and knocks on the door and just checks in, whether it's their wife going, I've noticed something is different. We need to have community around us, because you can't trust yourself all the time with, knowing what's happening, because you're within your own brain. You can only see so much. So I really do think that idea of like feeling worthy of care, feeling worthy of love, feeling worthy of, the types of relationships that you want to have, feeling worthy of a doctor who's attending to your needs. Like it's wild that we are in a place right now where healthcare has kind of become a privilege rather than a right. And I think that we need to shift away from that.
Yeah. I mean, so what kind of got me thinking when you were talking was, what are some of the obstacles to a culture that is more accepting of men talking more about their mental health or their health in general? What are the influences? What are some of the, I don't know, influences or ideas or organizations or whatever it is that are encouraging men to go in the opposite direction of what they need to be doing for, to have just better health?
I think that, as you said before, I think technology has heaps of benefits, obviously, but most of the benefits that it's selling to us at the moment are around productivity, are around going harder and faster, are actually gamifying our lives so that we continue to stay on these apps, which actually reduces offline connection time with others. We're also like, we're so afraid of boredom we're so afraid of silence. And in those moments when we're sitting on the toilet without a phone, that's when you start to actually attune to maybe I'm feeling something. You know what I mean? It's like those are the moments in quiet times. Like the fact that lots of men are spending most of the time on their phone when they're having dinner with their family, like that's when you build the connection for your wife to go, how are you doing? And you to actually consider, oh, that was a shit day. And actually that was a shit week. And if you don't stop and pause and consider and reflect with somebody else where those opportunities arise, if we don't grab them, that's seriously problematic. And that's why we're actually getting this breakdown in an understanding of our own health and well-being, because it's not being prioritized. It's just not, it's not a voice that we are honing over time. And so when we think about like the influences that are kind of pulling us away from our own health, I think that we should really, consider what is making us healthier. What are the things that actually make us feel better, that make us connect with others? And I think that, employers especially have a real responsibility to like move beyond the cupcakes in the they do these like morning teas where we're going to talk about mental health, and we're going to do a 15-minute morning tea, and you're going to come in, and then we're going to say, some partners are going to come down and say, oh, it's really important to talk about stress and make sure that you're doing okay and check in on everyone else. And then go back to your workplace and work until 2 a.m. and we're going to slam you, And it's like culture. Culture is the important thing here that I think everyone is like taking for granted, which is that you can build culture if you create teams and you create, a community that values this stuff. And that's what we're trying to do at Movember is, we're building a community that understands that this cannot be taken for granted. And we're not doing it in a way that's like reinforcing soft outcomes. It's like fundamentally, you want to live longer, you want to live healthier, you want to make more money. All of these things are directly in line with you getting your shit together early, with you realizing what's happening, slowing down, going and having that one doctor's visit rather than spending 10 days in a clinic. Like there's just simple math here that I think people are missing out on that we really want to push.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to kind of off topic maybe, but this is kind of what I was thinking as you were talking. But, before I really got into health and started doing what I do with Manful Yoga, I used to think that physical health and working out and eating well was like all you needed to have a healthy body. And it wasn't until I started understanding the connection between mental and emotional well-being and your physical well-being, and realizing that, if you could work out every day for 4 hours and eat totally clean, but if you have terrible relationships and you have really poor emotional health, then you're probably going to die sooner than somebody who eats terribly, doesn't exercise, and has really great relationships and a sense of purpose. So are there anything, what can you tell people about, what can you speak to that, like to the data of what does the data say about, the risk of, let's say, heart disease or I don't know, prostate cancer, like whatever it is between, mental, emotional health, relationships and physical health.
So this is not a tangent, Dean. This is like core to the issue. And it's something that we are trying to do a lot of. Men's health, the way it's been conceived to date is like purely physical. Okay, so you look at the research base and it's like men's health pre-2010, like psychological well-being wasn't even really a part of it. Like there was a bit of stuff on depression that me and my colleagues had written. There was a bit on male suicide because we were seeing trends there. But there was a huge focus on, heart disease, stroke, prostate and testicular cancer, which are things that we've focused really heavily on. It was the biological. It was like, how are we going to do this, physical renovation in order to look after yourself? Now, you're seeing a massive pendulum swing now where, the US Surgeon General is going, okay, actually, I think the thing of our, the issue of our era is this loneliness and disconnection. And everyone's kind of talking about it in this really vague way, but it means so much. And it's considered this really soft outcome, but it shouldn't be. It's like the most important thing. And a piece of data that I think continuously rattles me is, the Harvard Longitudinal Survey, which you may have heard of. It began a long time ago. These guys, some of them are still alive. They're in their 90s. They got them as freshmen, and they followed them, for decades, and wanted to know what's happening in their life. They can't control for everything, but they're trying to look at their health and nutrition, their well-being, all of these outcomes. And what we find consistently is that the guys who are still alive now in their mid-90s, are the ones who had quality friendships. It didn't matter, as you say. It actually didn't even matter if they were smoking. Like, that's how full on this finding is. Like, if some of these men smoked and others didn't smoke and they didn't have any friends, they're dead already. Like, that's just the plain truth of it, which is that we are social beings fundamentally. Like, that's what we're here for. And men specifically, this is a really clear outcome. Men and women have the same levels of loneliness. We know that. But women act to reduce that loneliness. When they're feeling that, they go out, they pick up their phone. They don't have this shame, this fear of connection. And lots of men just suppress this. They just push it down. But the need is just as strong. And so what is really important is that loneliness is a human experience. We're all going to feel it. And that's not the issue. It's what you do with it. In the same way that if you have stress, you can drink it away, but it's going to come back stronger. Or you can meditate, or you can run. Like, there are so many options that I think lots of guys don't see. And lots of those feel a lot harder for them. But in my eyes, extended, painful loneliness feels like the worst outcome. So I'm not really sure why picking up the phone and calling a friend is so painful. So, Dean, I think that when we're talking about men's health, I start to think of it holistically now, which is like, it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social, like, and I think of them as like Marvel rings. It's like, if you have one of them and you disregard another, you need to have balance here. You need to make sure that you're focusing on all of these elements, and you're kind of titrating them so that they are in line with one another. Because if you disregard one of them, if you disregard your friends because you just want to do exercise on your own consistently, and then suddenly you don't have anyone to talk to, I just think that that's a really poor outcome. So we're trying to see men's health as a really evolved and complex day-to-day practice that, there's so many guys out there who are like ripped as hell, but they're like misogynistic assholes, who can't sit down and talk with women and like don't respect them or what. Like, there's so many examples of this stuff where you need to have balance. You need to have balance in your life, and you need to make sure that you are able to consider holding all of these truths at the same time.
What do you think is preventing men from acting on those feelings of loneliness? Like, what do they think is going to happen? And I could speak for myself, but like, I'm curious, like, I'd like to hear what the data says. Like, what do men say about, I think like, if I'm just thinking for myself, like, I think there's like any sort of male companionship is seen as gay. So like men who don't want to like, well, I don't want to seem like I'm gay. So I don't want to I don't want to call my friend, or I don't want to hang out with my friend, or I don't want to like to have too close of a friendship. Like, this is like, I went to London a year ago, and we were shocked at how many guys were out just getting dinner with each other. Like, going out with their mates, right? Like, that doesn't happen here. You don't see that here. Or like, if you do, it's like at a bar and they're watching TV and they're totally absorbed in the TV, right? They're not actually like talking with each other. So,
yeah,
I mean, that's
I have
just what comes to mind.
so many thoughts, Dean. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, share your thoughts. Cause I have, I'm just one person with my own experience. I'm not the data collector guy.
Yeah. So, I think that we need to understand what the fear is, which, as you say, like there's like an anti-femininity, anti-homosexuality thing that's going on there. There's no doubt about that, which is like, if I am overly close and vulnerable with someone, then I'm going to be perceived as weak. I'm going to be perceived as gay. I'm going to be perceived as, needy, which is at odds with the type of manhood that I want to put out into the world. Little do they know that the very act of distancing themselves from others is, kind of the fastest road to mental and emotional weakness, struggling and breakdown, really. If you think about like picking up the phone, and we look at this consistently amongst different groups of guys, like picking up the phone and calling someone and asking them to go out for dinner or whatever it might be, like the fear of rejection is really, really strong amongst many guys, and that vulnerability that it takes to say, I actually want this. I want this from you. I want this connection. Like that's a fundamentally vulnerable thing to do, to put yourself out there and say, I want to hang out with you. The really strange thing here, though, Dean, is that everyone is clear on the fact that men are like yearning for this. Like, look at I Love You, Man, the movie. That thing blew up. Guys consistently talk about it, like Step Brothers. Like, you can list all of these movies where it's men just hanging out in the same way that, like, we know we've done so much data with young guys, and we ask them, why do you listen to Rogan? Yeah. What is it about Joe Rogan? And they go, oh, it's guys having a good time together. Like, there's this yearning to hear men having fun, connecting, being in the same room together. And so when guys tell us, oh, I can't reach out to him, I can't possibly do that, I call bullshit consistently, because I'm like, I know that that's all that you want, but you have this massive wall of fear of seeming gay, of, this idea that intimacy for some reason is a no-go for you and your friends. And, you go to Italy and all men are kissing each other on the cheek. Like, there's so much cultural diversity here that happens. But I'm really concerned at, like, the suppression of needs, this idea that, like, this is something that all of us value, and we're moving through the world denying ourselves this thing, and all of us are doing it. So it's like, if you're in a locker room, everyone wants to say, should we grab a meal after this? And if you look around, no one goes first. And it's like, that's the saddest state of manhood that I can see, which is like, everyone is silencing their needs. And that's when health outcomes start to worsen,
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm thinking back to college. I never really, like I remember I went out, I when I was there for the summer, for summer school, we would go out like all the time. And then like one of my friend through a friend said, like, hey, let's go to this bar beforehand. And I went with him, and I remember just hanging out with him at the bar and thinking like how weird it was for me. Like I rarely went to hang out with just one guy at a bar. And I was like, this is weird for me. I'm not used to having like a one-on-one conversation with another man. Like this is like really different for me. So like, I don't know, like, and I've been involved in plenty of school, organizations, and I played sports all my life growing up. But I never really had true intimacy with other men. It was always in like a group environment, and it was always, there was always kind of, I think we kind of just defaulted to like cultural norms of male behavior. So it was, it was very much like, giving each other shit, calling each other pussy. Like, you know, it was like, or like talking about things that I thought guys wanted to talk about. Like, oh, let's talk about workouts. Let's talk about, like success. Let's talk about,
girls,
meeting girls, you know? Yeah. It was like this. And so there was, I remember like I had a friend who was in my carpool. He was one of my teammates on my carpool. And so I would, you know, we would go to practice, you know, however many times per week. But I remember he would try to have conversations that were more than surface level conversations. And I got mad at him one day. I was like, dude, can we just talk about you just talk about the weather? Can you just talk about, you know, something basic? Like all of your questions are so deep. Like it's annoying, you know? And like,
imagine what all my friends think about me, Dan.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's different now, you know, and now I've gone the other direction, and now I just talk about whatever I feel like talking about. You know, I'm just like, this is what I want to talk about now. And if it's like, you know, and if I give people, you know, in my life a few opportunities, and usually they're like, you know, they're people that we know from school. Like that's who we tend to hang out a lot with. And we go like, oh, this is Declan's friend from school, so we're gonna have a play date and we'll talk with the parents. But if we hang out with them a few times and the conversations never go anywhere, I'm like, yeah, we're done with them. Like I'm not wasting my time with these conversations that don't have any depth. I'm like, you just go, you want to connect, and then it just doesn't happen. I'm like, this is dumb. This guy's just trying to impress me with famous people that he indirectly knows. He's like, oh, I've got a friend who met Kesha once, or like I've got a friend who, you know, I'm like, this is a stupid conversation. I don't want to have this, you know?
Yeah. It's a mask. So, that's a mask, Dan. And that's like the thing that I get to do, I guess, as a therapist is like, everyone has a rich interior life. Some people just have way more boundaries that cut them off from that ability to access it. And so like you as a, you know, in your early 20s when you're sitting there and you're like, dude, like stop asking these questions. Like, can we just talk about the weather? Now, if you look back at that, you're like, you want to have meaningful conversation. You wanted to, but you didn't have the language. It felt uncomfortable. You know, you thought he was like pushing and prodding you, like all of that stuff.
Well, I had totally different values, and I was actually just reflecting on this over the weekend and like why fatherhood has been like such a difficult transition for me. And it's because my values before were all focused on, they were success oriented. They were focused on success. They were focused on personal growth. They were focused on, you know, like physical fitness, looking a certain way in the mirror, like physical performance, you know, athletic performance. And so that's what I value. That's what like I wanted to be better at. I didn't value intimacy. I did not value connection. I thought that if I focused on success and personal growth, that I would feel fulfilled and that I would be happy. And, you know, after years of doing that and feeling like I'm doing like, you know, I feel like I have like a reasonable level of success, you know, like, okay, you know, I'm pretty strong. I feel like I look pretty good, and, you know, I feel like I've got a pretty good physique, but still, like, I was like, well, then why am I not happy yet? Like, what's going on here? And so, you know, there's been a very slow, gradual, painful shift of values over the last few years that, you know, I think I'm moving toward happier, and not, you know, I wouldn't say I'm happier. I'm pulling from the, I'm pulling from the Oprah Winfrey, you know, Brooks book. The signpost of happier instead of happy. But anyways, yeah. So that's why those conversations, I didn't want to have them, because I was like, well, that's not going to make me happy having these conversations. We need to talk about how we can be better.
For sure.
We need to talk about how we can be more successful, and that's what'll make me happy. And
and that's what you'd been sold, and that's like the one-dimensional attitude of what this should look like, what, you know, being a successful man in the 21st century is, which is completely at odds with, like, you know, a century ago when we believe that it's like, oh, our grandfathers were all just like doing this and it was straight down the line. Like, there was much more intimacy amongst friends. Like my grandfather, the amount of male friends that he had, the connections that he had, the dances that they all went to. Like there was closeness and connection there. And we have this belief that like this is the only way to do it, and it's a lie. And it's, you know, there's only so much I can rail against, like, oh, you become a father and then you work it out. But like that's pretty beautiful that it's like it takes bringing something else into the world as a mirror to shine up against you and go, oh God, what have I been doing? The sad thing is that some people don't come to that, you know, realization, and it hurts. And it also hurts to have to do that in your mid-30s where you're like, oh, what have I been doing for the past 15 years, 20 years, you know? So I like to think that we can get to the point where this success-failure dichotomy, this attitude of like what this really singular one-dimensional standard of manhood is, which is, yeah, purely based on your bank balance, your title at work, your size of your bicep, how much you can lift, whatever it might be, like that is always going to fall flat when it comes down to it. And I think that people just realize that at a later point, and the longer it goes, the more powerless they feel to change it, you know, and that's why you're grappling with it in the same way that I am, you know, consistently, which is like, how are we going to expand our horizons really and move towards growth with a much broader, you know, spectrum of what growth looks like. That's what we're trying to do at Movember is clarify to you that being a modern man can take shape in so many different ways, and like sit down and think about that. Don't shy away from that. Lean in, have those conversations with other men, because as I said, everyone is trying to work this stuff out in silence, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. And I'm kind of thinking now toward, you know, how do we start fixing this problem? Like, how do we start, you know, how do we start changing the way that we think about it? And one thing that came to mind is, for me, I guess I could call them failures, but all of my biggest failures, or all of my significant life events, or all the time that I've had the most pain or the most discomfort or the biggest feeling of failure, those have all been, for me, the biggest times, the best opportunities for growth. You know, like, you know, I think, you know, if you're in this world at all, like if you're in this self, you know, improvement world at all, I think most people know that. Like, I think most people understand that those times of tumult are opportunities for self-growth. They're opportunities for you to kind of shed a previous belief about yourself that was holding you back. Like for me, you know, like I think I've had ups and downs with Manful Yoga. You know, I've had, I think like, you know, there's been plenty of months where I'm like, oh my God, are we going to run out of money? You know, and being able to go through that and to experience like this feeling of failure and have to come up with a different way to think of valuing myself. Like, okay, well, if I'm not like as great as I thought I would be successfully, you know, with this on-demand yoga business that I built, well, how can I continue to think of myself as valuable? And so having to shift that to, oh, you know what, I'm a great dad, or like I'm trying to be a better dad because I'm here a lot and I show up and I make an effort, or, you know, I'm really proud of the relationships that I've developed with my wife because we're very close with one another and we've had a lot of really difficult conversations, and we've gone through a lot together. And so I'm proud of that. So having gone through different failures and having to really like having the blessing of these different failures and these different, you know, these challenges in my life, that for me has been where I've been able to make these big strides in my own mental and emotional wellness. And so I'm saying that as a way for guys to like be on the lookout for those, but also to kind of turn it over to you and say, where are the opportunities that guys can look for, making these changes?
I think that, as you said there, Dean, like when you are faced with hardship, you have a number of options. You can double down and do the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Or you can take pause and say, what matters to me? And that's what kind of happens when your business is struggling and you take pause and you say, oh, if this thing falls over, who am I? And if you don't have an answer, like that's where the midlife crisis comes in. That's where you go and you buy the Ferrari because you're like, I'm trying to like fill this hole, rather than going, actually, I'm a multidimensional person. And without this, I know that I put the time into being a good dad. I know that I put the time into being a good friend and husband. And I know that my hobbies and like spending a lot of time on the things that I love and value are going to, pull me through. Like that idea of being a singular version all the time and doing the same thing rigidly is not what being a successful human today kind of requires. It's not a simple trajectory towards success. It's consistently bumpy and it requires multiple inputs. And so taking that pause and going, where is my purpose? Where is my meaning? And how do I embrace challenge and redefine myself consistently? Like at the core of modern day manhood is flexibility. If you are using rigidity as your mode of operation, if you are doing the same thing, this idea of stoicism, for instance, love it. Yeah. It's extremely important, like being stoic and, understanding your bounds and knowing that you have the ability to like regulate your own emotions. Beautiful. There is a time and place to be stoic and there is a time and place to be vulnerable and open. And I think that lots of people go, oh, I heard this thing on social media and therefore that is my mantra and that is all I do all the time. And you're not always in a fire, It's like we have to be willing to reflect on what's happening and adapt fundamentally. And that's what fatherhood brings. That's what marriage brings. And we know that if you do the same thing when you've just, started a relationship and you do the same thing you've done when you were single, like it doesn't work because you're now in a interaction in the same way that, friendship. So I think that we need to be really willing to have those moments of reflection of going, what matters to me and how am I going to respond to this situation in a way that's going to be in my best interests, and to grapple with the stuff that is painful and go, how am I going to evolve here in a way that actually changes the outcome?
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about, I think subconsciously, I used to believe that the more masculine behavior I could have, the more, the better it would be for me. Like the more value I would have as a man. And so I would like try to like validate myself. I would try to like look for confirmation, like this is still masculine, right? Like this is still a masculine thing. Right. And then, realizing that, okay, like masculinity is important in some situations, but also it's not like, it's not important in other situations too. And I think even the idea of masculinity and femininity, it that creates the wrong dichotomy as well. Like I much more prefer like the idea of the ship and the sea, right? Because then it's not, there's not man or woman attached to it, but like sometimes you're the ship and sometimes you're the sea, and that way you're like, oh, I don't have to feel bad about being the sea right now, or like I don't have to feel bad about being the ship right now. There's no, there's like nothing attached to it. And you were talking about purpose, finding meaning, and so I'm wondering, and I know we're kind of running out of time, so I'm wondering if there's like, are there 5 things or are there 6 things or like a little checklist of things that, guys should be at least thinking about or taking action on, like once a week or once a month, like, if we're looking at these areas of, you described physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, relational, or social? Like, what are those? Yeah. What are the things that, like, if you had a basic checklist, what are the things that like all guys should be doing?
Yeah, 100%. So I think that in the same way that it's like you were forced to have those thoughts when you had a kid and, your whole life is blown up. It's great to do this stuff preemptively to say, how am I going to show up? What are the connections that really matter to me? What do I value in myself and in others? Like, when was the last time anyone asked that? It's like, what do I value in myself? Like, what matters? What do I have to offer? And if it's purely about you as a worker, if it's you as product, that's an issue. Like, there has to be more. And so I think that when it comes to that social relational stuff, that is so important to be like, what are people offering me and what do I offer others? And like, what are my superpowers is something that I think is really important that we really understand. And again, that seems like a really soft question, and I don't want to have to grapple with that. But if you're answering that, like, my ability to go to the gym every day is my superpower, yeah, Houston, we've got a problem. So that there's some really fundamental, just like reflective things. This idea that like everyone needs to be in therapy is just bullshit. I can put myself out of a job, but I do think that some of these questions, if you are brave enough to be honest with you, if you are courageous enough, you can ask them of yourself, and you just shouldn't be afraid of what the answer is, because it's probably the truth. And that is the way in which we progress. Like, that's the way in which we move forward. And so in the same way that I said, lots of people don't want to know when they go to the doctor because they don't want to find out. But like, finding out means acting. Finding out means doing the thing and evolving and improving. And that's what I think has been lost in translation here. So when it comes to, again, the physical and mental health side of things, I think that like really understanding where you're at on a day-to-day basis and working out what your goals are. Like, it sounds really lofty, but like the idea that weight goals or that lifting goals or that, like these can be much more simple, I think, in some ways, which is like, I want to make sure that and there's a really beautiful model around, you text mates once a week, you call them once a month, and you see them once a quarter. Like, if you're not living up to that standard, you think back to college times, you're seeing everyone every hour. And that's what we actually want. Like, that's the beauty of connection. And now we're at the point where it's like, oh God, can I see my friends once a quarter? Like, I don't know if I can make that happen. That's the saddest reality. Like, do it, just make it happen, And so I think that we need to, when it comes to doing that, understanding of that holistic view of ourselves, we need to write down what the actions are that we really want to enable ourselves to do, and then work out what the fear is around enacting it, and then speak to someone about that and make action happen, because you want to pick up your phone and call that friend, and you're afraid of all of those feelings that we've discussed. But loneliness is something you should fear far more. So overcome that discomfort, because it's going to lead to gold.
Yeah. Love it. All right. Well, we're going to do a follow-up interview. So I've got you on the calendar. We're going to do another one. We're going to get to know Zac, which I'm excited about. So thank you for doing that. And thanks for sharing all of this information with us today. I'm sure there's tons of things that people can take away from this, but I love that last thing: text weekly, call monthly, see quarterly. I like actionable information too. Good. Yeah. Thanks for coming, and thanks for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate it.
Thanks, Dean. Great to be here.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it inspires you to be a better man, and make sure to come back, because Zac's going to come back as well. See you guys in the next episode. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that interview. Again, we're going to have Dr. Zac coming back for another episode. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and be on the lookout for that next episode with him. If you are enjoying this podcast, I encourage you to leave a review. You can do that wherever you listen to the podcast, on Apple, on Spotify, or whatever platform you're using. You can also watch video versions of the podcast on the Better Man Podcast YouTube channel and also in the Manful Yoga app and members area, ad-free. If you're already part of our community, I want to say thank you so much for being here. I hope that this is helping you with your health journey. And if you're not already part of our community, you can get started with a free 7-day trial at manfulyoga.com/join. And if you're not quite ready for that, we do have a free 7-day Beginner's Yoga for Men challenge, which is great for not just your physical health, but also for your mental and emotional health. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you got a lot out of it. And I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. And as always, I hope this inspires you to be a better man.